Yes, ordinance, yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the September 4th meeting of the Morgan County Board of Commissioners. If you would please stand with me for the pledge and then remain standing for invocation. Would you please bow with me? Father God, we ask for your blessing and guidance on our meeting today, as well as the rest of the day that follows. We thank you for the opportunity to gather here, both as representatives of our government and as citizens of Morgan County, to participate in our local government. We pray that you would guide our discussion, that we would receive good information and make good decisions that are beneficial to our community and pleasing to you. 2020 has been a tough year for so many, and we ask that in those times of trials that we would lean on you as our source of comfort and strength, and that you would bless those that are suffering in various ways, maybe a job loss or loss of a loved one, or other challenges that they're facing, that you would give them comfort and strength, and that we would look forward to another day. We thank you for all the blessings that we have, and that we are able to call this great community our home, and to be able to work here and raise families here. We thank you for that, and we pray that we be good stewards of it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
We have a lengthy agenda today. We'll do our best to get through it as quickly as possible. Our first item of new business is a rezone request. There's a parcel on Center Valley Road, request to rezone from residential 3 to agriculture 1. So at this time, I'd like to call the petitioner forward, and they can explain to us their request.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Sarah Clark, and this is my husband, Matt Clark. We're the owners of 1800 Center Valley Road. We're addressing you regarding our home and farm there. Matthew purchased the property in March of 2011 at the age of 21 to begin his dream of farming. Our small operation and our farm have grown over the past 9 years. We have poured our heart and soul and sweat and gumption into our beautiful property. In June of 2020, to our surprise, we were notified that our farm is not zoned agriculture, as all of the properties around us are, and we've been working diligently to rectify this. On August 10th of this year, we went before the zoning board to defend ourselves against the complaint of one neighbor. Of note, her property is almost the exact same size and design as our property and is zoned agriculture. We were scrutinized and reprimanded by the board without an investigation of the actual state of our farm. The Zoning Commission Board accused us of knowingly and willingly violating the zoning laws for the past 9 years. These allegations are unfounded and simply not true. We have been working with the USDA and have a pending NRCS grant to continue to improve our operation and facilities. We built a barn last September with the full approval of the Morgan County Commissioner's Office and the Assessor's Office. It was actually signed off by Laura Parker herself. Finally, we file our state and federal taxes as a farm and are registered with the Farm Service Agency and members of the Indiana Farm Bureau. It is clear we have not knowingly and willfully disregarded zoning laws. We acknowledge that our operation has done well and expanded over the last 9 years. We have expanded our facilities by purchasing additional property and intend to continue to do so. Our land, facilities, and farm plan have been inspected and approved by the USDA. Our farm operation plan is to winter 10 to 15 cows at Center Valley from November through April. This is per the guidance of the USDA as a sacrifice lot to preserve our pastures for the spring, summer, and fall. The remaining time, the cattle will be housed at our Clay Road property. We are taking the necessary steps to run a small family farm by working with the experts and have been assured that our property and facilities are adequate to move forward by the USDA and the NRCS. Our petition to rezone at Center Valley will allow us to continue to operate our farm, a valuable business in the Morgan County area, and if not approved, we'll be forced to cease our operation. In the words of my 3-year-old this morning, I hope the zoning commissioners don't make us get rid of our cows. He really wanted to be here today. Matt is going to talk a little bit more about our plans for expansion and a little bit more supporting details.
Good morning, thank you. As my wife said, we do work alongside with the NRCS and the USDA. All of the current plans that we have in place now are in junction with those two agencies. Our grant that we have through the NRCS probably should have been started by now, but due to COVID, it's been delayed, and part of our grant is part of our this 1800 Center Valley Road. As I explained in the meeting in August, that grant would allow for a heavy use pad, a 70 by 70 foot heavy use pad, automatic waters at the house, along with a couple heavy use pads and rotational grazing at these Clay Road property. With that being said, as Sarah said, we are continuing to grow. And as we do grow, obviously we will continue to purchase more land within Morgan County to grow our operation to be a valuable business to the community. You know, I don't want to pat on the back, but there's a lot of small family farms like us that fed their local communities during the pandemic when you couldn't buy local meat or produce at the store. So I think it's very valuable that we do have local small family farms. And the complaints of the one neighbor have not been investigated nor supported. Regardless whether we have livestock or not, she's gonna have water runoff from our property as we do from the other neighbor who's uphill from us. There's no muck in her driveway, and part of the water runoff is from her house alone, due to how her gutters drain and the top of her hill runs down. She hasn't had gravel in over 7 years, and with our sandy soil, you need gravel at least once a year, twice or every 2 years is extending that. One thing that Laura Parker put in her staff report is the quality of life. I find it interesting that can be a reason not to rezone when the Morgan County Health Department approved the rezone. So with that being said, we are taking the necessary measures to make sure that we are good neighbors. The last thing we want is a war with a neighbor, but we do have support from all our other neighbors, some which came to that first meeting. And with that being said, I've already started working with NRCS in regards to, you know, are there different plans we can draw up? Is there anything else we can do? Which, you know, it's all been tabled right now due to COVID and the engineers and all that. So, you know, there are things that we're doing to try to, you know, make it better. But as I said before, we are operating under the NRCS's guidelines, you know, and work closely with them and the USDA office. And, you know, I know one thing that was brought up by the neighbor that complained was her property value decrease. If you look at the area we live in, I do not feel that my house decreases the property. If there's any house that needs to be worried about, it's 1805 Center Valley Road that looks like a flea market, which the neighbor that filed a complaint has actually been giving donations to the flea market to be sold. That house is an eyesore to the neighborhood, not our house. And with that being said, you know, we have 4 children. We have a 1-year-old triplets and a 3-year-old. Us as parents want the best for our kids. There's a lot of kids in this community that need a good family. And, you know, we want our kids to be the next generation that gets well done. We want our kids to grow up and be good leaders in their community, good stewards of the Morgan County community. You know, we don't want our kids to be troublesome. We want to teach our kids to respect the land and respect what you have. And I think teaching our 3-year-old knows exactly where things come from. So, you know, putting that together, I think it's an important piece of our family to raise our kids properly, to be good, you know, good citizens of the community and, you know, the state and world alone. So with that being said, you know, another piece was Laura Parker put in there that we're a feedlot. We're not a feedlot. If you look at the space requirements for a feedlot, we're over double what the requirements are for a feedlot based on the USDA numbers. We're not a feedlot. It's a sacrifice paddock. Everybody that runs cattle has a sacrifice paddock within, you know, during the winter time. So, you know, with that being said, again, I think we've taken the necessary steps, and this isn't just something we've decided overnight. We've been working on this for a long time, and part of the report The staff report does show that we're a new operation. That's false. We've been farming for 9 years. Have we been the size we are now for 9 years? Absolutely not. But I think any business starts out small and they grow. And we have acknowledged that, as we continue to grow, we will continue to purchase more land to run our operation. However, our home will always be part of the operation as it's needed, just due to the logistics of our operation. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Matt and Sarah. Any questions? Any questions of the board? We will hear the other side of the issue. Obviously, the complainant is here, and so we will give them a chance to talk as well. So there may be other questions that come up momentarily, but for now, is the board, any questions that the board would like to ask? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Karen Pierce, and I'll be speaking for my mother is the owner of the property, and I'll be speaking for the Pierce family. There is one thing that the Clarks could have done that might have solved the problem without us having to go to the zoning board, and that was to work with us to do something about it. Even after we filed the complaint, they have never spoke to us about anything they could have done where we could have solved the problem between just the two houses. If Matt and Sarah would have worked with us to find a solution, we would not be here today. We have been overly patient. Over the last 9 years, we voiced our concerns about the manure draining into our yard, the sickening smell of the hogs, and the depreciation of our property to be met with deaf ears. Instead of trying to solve the problem, the Clarks compounded the problem each year by adding more and more animals until we could not stand by and let the damage inflicted upon us stand without trying to do something about it. When Matt assured us that they would plan to do nothing about the problems, we started looking for a lawful solution and contacted the Morgan County Planning Commission. That was just the first thing. We didn't do anything else before then. We didn't know what to do. We support farmers. It's a hard and honorable profession. All my grandparents fed their families during the Depression operating small farms. We realized that the Clarks were young and experienced when they began their farming operation. However, claiming ignorance of the law is not a defense. I am surprised that the bank where the Clarks got their farm loan or grant did not find the zoning problem while performing their due diligence before closing the loan. Additionally, I would have thought the title company would have found that the land was zoned for residential use when Matt originally purchased the property from the previous owners. We were thrilled when Matt and Sarah moved next door and started their family. It had been a long time since we had babies living next door. I'm a kindergarten teacher and love children, so I doubly was excited about the 4 little ones that they have. We sincerely wish they get to operate a farm if that is their dream. However, our hope is they find property more suitable for that purpose. They are housing all of those animals. They have less than 2 acres, and the animals, 14 to 18 cows, 5 hogs on less than a half acre. In closing, we would like to restate that we are requesting that the rezoning be denied and the hogs and the cows be removed from this location. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. And I know that I was asked for my letter from the last zoning meeting, so I went ahead and put that on paper for you to put into the paperwork. And I also have 7 colored photographs to share of the urine and the manure standing. So can I pass that out to you?
Sure. Are those different than what we already have? We don't know. Okay. Yeah, we do have this, actually.
I made sure that I had color photographs so you can see the yellow urine standing in the yard. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any questions of the board of the Pierce family? Not hearing any, I'll open up for discussion from the board. Not hearing any discussion from the board, I'll give a couple of comments of my own. We had a rezone issue before us not too long ago that was complicated in a different way, where the recommendation, may not have been consistent with the direction that we would have liked to have gone or ultimately gone. And this one, in my opinion, kind of falls into a similar category of being a little bit tough to come to a clear decision. I am a little concerned, though, that it looks to me like we're approaching getting into the business of determining how many animals a person can have on their property, even though there's no ordinance to that fact. And that we're also concerned about the size of the property being zoned agriculture when in fact there's no size requirement. And the nearby properties are similar in size and similar in zoning. This is also a mixed-use area presently and in our future comprehensive plan. I think also, though, that a reasonable person can probably look at the operation and say that that particular parcel is completely tapped out, and that any future growth would absolutely most certainly need to occur at a different location. The Clarks have another piece of property where they keep these animals, from what I gather, about 3/4 of the year on approximately 6 acres. And if they were able to get utilities over to that property, my understanding is that the animals would stay over there permanently if they could work towards getting utilities to that lot. So while the concerns about the number of animals are certainly fair to raise, we're not able to really say if someone has too many animals or not. And hopefully the Clarks will take advantage of the other piece of property that they have when considering their growth. I think really our only issue is whether or not this parcel should be zoned agriculture. And given the fact that the neighboring properties are ag, given the fact that our comprehensive plan calls for mixed use, I don't see any reason why we're going to get into the business of regulating the number of animals. If we're going to get into the business of regulating the number of animals, then we need to have an ordinance before the board that would spell out what number of animals are appropriate. That way we're not put into a situation where we have to use our uneducated judgment on how many animals is necessary. So however the motion ends up being, I intend to support the rezone from residential 3 to Ag 1.
Ryan? I applaud them for what they're wanting to do. I think the problem is they're wanting to do too much in a too small an area. And I think that's the biggest problem. They just need to have more area to do their project. And it's pretty obvious that there's too many animals on that small a space.
Yeah, I certainly agree that I think you don't need to be trained in farming or livestock rearing or anything of that nature to say that they probably have absolutely tapped out this particular piece of property. What I think that's a very fair statement, and I think even the Clarks would probably recognize that and acknowledge that as well, which is precisely why they have other property that these animals spend the majority of the year at. I don't disagree with you, Norman, that they have absolutely maximized this particular piece of land. That doesn't mean, though, that it shouldn't be zoned agriculture. And that's where I keep coming down to, is that none of that information should necessarily on its face prevent this piece of property from having an agriculture zoning. And it appears to me that we're wanting to use the zoning laws to enforce rules that we don't have on the books anywhere else. And so that, while I don't disagree with your comment that they've done all they can do at this particular piece of property, I don't think that should prevent them from having an agriculture zoning. And we should not attempt to regulate the number of animals via the zoning ordinance. And I have shared that with them. I have shared that with the Clarks, that it is my personal belief that they have maximized this particular piece of property and that they need to be very cognizant of any growth plans need to occur elsewhere. So that's not something that they're hearing from me for the first time today.
My question, I guess, would be why was it ever zoned R3 to start with?
Well, it started out with, and I don't want to speak out of turn, so the Plan Commission director is certainly here to keep me in check. It started out as ag zoning being in an unincorporated area. It was turned into residential when a small subdivision was platted and developed, I believe, and I mean small. It's 4 or 5 parcels, if I'm not mistaken. And that was the time when the residential zoning came into effect. I believe that was probably 30 years ago or more. Okay.
My whole 2 cents on it, and I'm like Norman, I want to commend the Clarks for what they're trying to do, young family, trying to get a business started. I've been there, done that, and I commend you on that. And I told you that in the hallway out there and during the last meeting. But I know whenever I started up Hell's Auto Repair, I was 24 years old, 3 years older than what you was, Matt, when you started that business. Yeah, I was in town here, but I had to make sure I had zoning before I could even do my business. And a little bit of due diligence, and I understand you was young, but I was only 24 then too. So, I mean, that's something you got to do your due diligence on if you're going to start a business. I commend you, though. I commend you on trying to raise your kids, because, I mean, this is my 24th year taking prisoners out. And, I mean, it's a shame of the broken families, and these guys don't even have fathers or grandfathers willing to teach them a trade. So I commend you highly on that. And thank God for me having parents to be able to do that. The other big thing is, it is a small piece of property. I know when I told you in the hearing, I mean, back when I was raising Doug in a small little farm like you guys was, I never had more than 5 cows. Rule of thumb back then was 1 head, 1 acre. And that's what I did. And it was always trouble whenever you sold off them 4 at the auction and kept one trying to fatten it out so you could keep it and butcher it yourself, because, I mean, they're very social, and it was hard to keep just 1 cow in a pen. So I know how that goes. But I know you do have the other property. I've reached out to some other people that's Farm Bureau members and farmers and explained the situation. I know one of them at least went and drove it as well. And I had driven that property. I do all of them that I vote on, so I had driven that property. I do know you stated out here that their land's a lot higher and you couldn't be draining on them. Well, you know very well right there in the front of your property, front of their property, it is a lot lower. Elevation certificates, anybody on the board can pull up Elevate and you can see you are draining on them up front. In the back, they are draining on you. But I mean, it's, We try to do our due diligence. Like Ryan said earlier, this is a toughie. I'm very pro-farming. My family grew up on farming, so, but I think it's too small a piece of property to be doing that many head of cows and that many animals on. My biggest concern, though, we give you the R zoning or the ag zoning, there's nothing stopping you from putting 50 head of cattle on there, 50 head of or hogs on there, and that's my biggest issue. I mean, you're only 2 acres, and I got to stick with what the board recommended, but I do commend you for what you're trying to do. Just I don't think it should be on that one piece of property that close. My 2 cents.
Other questions or discussion? Not hearing any further, I would call for a motion on the request. We have a rezone request from R3 to Agriculture 1, and it has been adjudicated by the Plan Commission and forwarded to us with an unfavorable recommendation. One more call for question or discussion. Entertain a motion.
I would make the motion that we honor the Plan Commission's recommendation and let it remain as zoned as R3.
There's a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation from the Plan Commission and deny the rezone request, leaving the property as R3. Does that motion receive a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion to deny the rezone carries by a vote of 2-1. Next item on our agenda, we have the Morgan County Health Department. Ms. Jeannie LaFerry is here. Quotes on the truck that they're procuring, as well as disposal of a vehicle as well. Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning.
Morning, Jeannie.
I don't have anything to say. I just came just in case you all had any questions. I think it's pretty explanatory. We just need the 2 quotes signed, as well as the documents to sell the 1 vehicle. So. Oh, okay, sure. The 2 vehicles are going to be purchased with state grant money, the local health maintenance fund, carryover funds, so that we've had for some time. So, so it's not anything that's coming out of county
Sure.
funds or.
We'll start with the quote on the 2 vehicles. Any questions of Jeannie on that? Not hearing any, entertain a motion for approval on that. That, of course, is through Enterprise with our fleet leasing program.
So moved.
Motion to approve is made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries on that 3-0. We have the disposition of the vehicle that needs to be disposed of.
Right, and there are, I don't know, 3 or 4 documents that I presented that will have to be signed for that transaction.
Any questions of Jeannie on the disposal of the other vehicle? If not, I'd entertain a motion that we, well, entertain any motion, but I would suggest that we just have a signatory to execute these documents and get them what they need.
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor to approve signature of the necessary documents for the disposal of the health department vehicle. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you very much. Next, we have a surplus property donation. Is there an office holder here to speak on that? They may not be needed, but just in case questions come up, we have 2 resolutions approving the donation of surplus property from another political subdivision. One is from Clinton County, donating a ScanPro 800 microfilm scanner. The second resolution is a disposition of donated surplus property from Fayette County, a similar piece of property, a ScanPro 800 microfilm scanner.
Motion on both items.
A motion to approve both resolutions has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. We went ahead and voted. Sorry, Jan, that was a false alarm. You can go back to whatever you're doing. Thank you. Next up, Mr. Scott Hamilton, AT&T addendum for our 911 center.
Good morning.
Good morning, Scott.
This is a addendum. We're actually asking for approval for an additional appropriation letter to go to the county council in the amount of $171,000. Well, actually, the amount was 172. We just rounded up from rainy day funds. We believe that this is probably reimbursable through CARES funding. It will give us the ability, in case we would become, so far we've been very fortunate, not had any issues with COVID in our 911 center.
Sure.
Or not anything significant, but if we would get into a position where we would have to evacuate the center for cleaning or for more effective social distancing, this would give us the ability to activate remote 911 positions where we so choose to deploy those, and we could remotely receive 911 calls and then dispatch the appropriate responders.
Any questions of Scott on the additional appropriation request? Not hearing, and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion's made to authorize Scott to approach the county council for the additional appropriation request as he's outlined from the rainy day fund. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion on that carries by a vote of 3-0.
Thank you.
And then do we not need to act on addendum 2 to the AT&T agreement?
I guess we could at this point in time if the council approves the funding.
All right. So you're providing that as context for the additional appropriation request?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
that makes sense. If it's not an emergency, then we'll just wait.
It's
Okay.
not an emergency, then that way legal can get a chance to review it, because I don't think that Jim's had it yet. So
Perfect.
I can get a copy to him.
While you are up there, we also received an SOP from your center. No?
We're gonna hold on that. We're still trying to ferret out some language. I've been in contact with the state public access counselor to make sure that we're in compliance with everything that
Okay.
they desire.
That'll work then.
Okay.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
Scott. Starting on page 69 in the meeting packet, you'll see the current Morgan County off-road vehicle ordinance. Turn it over to our legal counsel for a discussion on that. They're proposing a few changes, and I think the intention here today is to start that conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I have intended to get in the packet for changes the ordinance regarding golf carts. As noted in the ordinance that's in the packet, that it specifically defines that a golf cart does not fall into that definition. While statute's been passed the last several years, and there are ordinances in various counties, cities, municipalities around the state, including the city of Martinsville, there isn't anything, I don't think, addressing specifically golf carts at present. I think that the language in the draft is relatively straightforward, but I would entertain discussion or comment, if any, from the commissioners with regard to how to limit or otherwise direct what roads of travel they would be permitted on. I've found a variety, or a handful anyway, of different options when I looked at what other counties have done. I currently have it drafted that they will not operate on any roadway with a posted speed limit of 30 miles per hour or greater. Of course, there's an exception or caveat for municipalities such as the city of Martinsville, that they have their own ordinance, as well as private neighborhoods and so forth. There, of course, are other counties who have listed certain, even lengthy lists of certain roads and so forth. Either of those approaches or a different approach, or if one of those is more palatable than another, I can refine and include in this draft. Most of the rest of this ordinance will simply include the requirements for operation or safety requirements that are on the vehicle, license, financial responsibility, et cetera.
Thank you, Jim. The genesis of this came from a request that I had out of a resident in Heartland Crossing. And the board will be familiar with the fact that Heartland Crossing was designed and is essentially a quasi-golf cart community. The main roads through there have additional width to accommodate bikes and other modes of transportation. And of course, the subdivision is built around a golf course. So I had received a real respectful letter from a resident there, just asking for consideration that golf carts be permitted in certain parts of the county. And it brings up a very fair question, that we have roads where there would be little to no harm or danger in a golf cart operating, such as Heartland Crossing is probably one of our best examples in the entire county. But of course, there would be certainly a number of roads where the operation of a golf cart on a county road would be very hazardous. So it started a discussion of how do we allow that in some places where it clearly makes sense, but also preventing the operation in places where it's dangerous. So we'll have the draft for our second meeting in September. Circulate it prior to that, of course, and we'll have that for consideration on our second meeting in September, which is on the 21st. With that, any other questions or discussion from the board? All right, we'll have that back on the agenda for September 21. Next item that's listed on our agenda is EMS fee schedule and a med bill agreement. However, I'm not entirely sure we're ready to act on these pieces. Okay.
So you have in your packet a med bill contract. Med bill is the billing company that our EMS service works with. This is an updated agreement because our old one is expiring. Donnie has been working with them to make sure that we get the best rates in there that we will be paying them. However, and Jim's working on an EMS fee schedule update, the numbers in this contract are representative of changing our fee schedule. Should we end up not changing our fee schedule, we will have to negotiate different prices with MedBill. So we wanted to give you this contract before our next meeting on the 21st, so you have time to review it. If you have any questions, Donnie and Jim and I are comfortable with this, but we want to make sure substantively you don't have any changes you want to make. And then we'll come back at our next meeting with that proposed fee schedule the financial modeling has been done through MedBill to make sure that we were good with those numbers. Donnie was very happy with them, and so it'll be up to you all policy-wise to determine that.
So MedBill had assisted Donnie in proposing some changes to our fee schedule, and then subsequently he negotiated the new MedBill agreement based on making those changes. So we'll hold off on potentially approving the updated agreement with MedBill until such time as the ordinance is revised. And so we'll take that back up for consideration on the 21st. That brings us to MOU between Morgan County and Johnson County, Indiana, and I think this is largely an update as well, as we're still working through the locution services, and this is supplementing that. I'll have Josh and Scott give you an update on that.
Yeah, as Ryan said, this is related to the locution server that Johnson County is going to let us use. Scott recommended that in good faith for the benefit we're getting from Johnson County, that we would provide a CAD to CAD link for Johnson County so that our CAD systems can dispatch one another through locution, and that we can interact with Johnson County's apparatuses and likewise. So this would be an MOU for us to do that. We're not asking for you all to act on this today because we want to make sure.
Purpose for us in pursuing that, but did want to at least have that discussion on whether or not to affirmatively take a pass or to pursue it. And I'd like to have, if Tony has any thoughts too, I know you've been involved in some discussion about it. If you have something to add, you're more than welcome to do so.
I don't have much to add, but I'll come up anyway
because you're next anyway.
No, I thought that covered everything that we have at this current time.
So I think we're pretty uniform in our lack of interest in pursuing, and we can just simply let this September 26th date come and go, at which point the Department of Administration will pursue a public auction.
Make a motion that we be not interested in that small parcel.
There's a motion and a second on the floor that the Morgan County Board of Commissioners does not have an interest in the parcel and will pass on our first right of refusal. Is there, well, that made and seconded, any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries by a vote of 3-0. And now it's the Tony Hinkle show for a whole lot of items.
Yeah, we'll try to wrap this up as quickly as possible.
The floor is yours, Tony.
Thank you, sir. We will try to wrap this up as quickly as possible. So the first item is Street Naming Commission. That has lagged a little bit in these last couple of weeks. A big part of that is because we actually received all the information for the detailed version of the Section 6 transfer agreement. And we've been combing through that as well. So we didn't really want to get kind of the cart ahead of the horse. Initially, we were going to do the street name commissioning on the just preliminary stuff, but now that we have more detailed, so we're gonna push that out as soon as possible, though, and we will get that committee assembled. I think yesterday it was sometime in middle of November is when they really would like to have those names, just so they can get the signs up. This isn't going to prevent any construction. This isn't going to prevent any. But this is something that we want to take some time and effort in. And as far as, we've got several locations where Old State Road 37 is. We've got several locations where we have various names that we just want to make sure that we're getting some addresses correct and that we can rectify anything that we want to rectify in the coming future along that I-69 corridor. So we're going to take our time, and we should have some more, at least meeting schedules by the next time we have the commissioners meeting. We should be able to tell you specifically when we're meeting and discussion and how that progresses. So,
good, very good.
After that, you have two small pages in front of you. I haven't published these out. These are kind of close hold, but these are the engineer recommendations and the District 1 recommendation for the RFPs that we issued for the engineering assessments that we want for the long-term plan that we have. Again, the brief overview, we have a current 10-year plan that I've put together for essentially our bridge replacement and infrastructure going forward. What that is for the next 5 years, we want to do LPA work where we submit 5 bridges and a road a year to NDOT for LPA funding. We have a very good problem in the sense that we got some fantastic proposals from several groups. We actually had 9 consultants submit on all of the RFPs that we put out, plus the 2 on-calls. Myself and Commissioner Voorhees have had some very healthy discussions on who should do what for what projects. As you can see from mine, I do recommend for Teeters Road, I recommend a DLZ for Bridge 97, SJCA, Bridge 104, BLN, Bridge 166 was Clark Dietz, and Bridge 29 was United. Bridge 49 was VS, and then 2 subsequent on-calls I'd like to give to Banning and USI. How I came to my recommendations were reading through all the proposals, using my technical background and identifying certain points that I see in each one of those proposals. What I did was I prioritized these, Teeters Road being number 1, and then the winner of who I selected through my scoring process was then essentially held back from winning much else. What this does is it actually spreads around some of the work that we have in the county so that we're not giving it all to one firm or 2 firms specifically. So I am trying to spread this out to firms that we have known and trust, and I do have 2 firms on here that really have not done any work at all in the county that I would like to see how they perform. That being USI and Clark Dietz. They haven't really done anything in the county that I can marginally tell. This is what we want to do going forward, I believe. I think this meets the plan that we have set forward, and this is a good first step going forward, and I'd like to continue along this path. Again, these are my recommendations, and I open the floor to any discussion.
Well, I wanted to use United on the Teeters Road project, and then also Bridge 29, which is in my district.
And I have...
Another bridge there, 49's in my district, but you can give that to whoever.
What Commissioner Voorhees has stated is that Teeters Road, he wanted to use United, and he is pushing for them to be selected. I will say this, whoever is selected by the commissioners will do a fantastic job. I have no qualms about that. We will be able to manage whoever it is, and they will do a good job for the county. We will make sure of that. My concern going forward, and it was strictly on a technical basis. When I was reading the proposals, I thought DLZ for Teeters Road, I thought they blew away the field. They put together a top-notch technical proposal going forward. The project manager that we would be getting from DLZ is a former NDOT commissioner. So she knows the ins and outs. She's been doing design work for 40 years. She was a previous county engineer as well. So I have worked well with her in the past. Whoever works on these projects going forward, all of them, there's going to be a lot of partnership regardless. I think on Teeters Road, depending on whoever the lead is, DLZ or United, I can see them both working together, and they're both going to get a piece of this. So my only concern is going with United. I prefer to work with DLZ in that regard for Chris Klicka specifically. Going forward then too, United does have several other jobs in the county with the highway department. They are going to still be an on-call with us. I do see using United as the principal point of contact for a quick turnaround of engineering on-call services for when I'm have my leave of absence coming up, which we can discuss discuss it a little bit later. So I do think that this meets a lot of the intent that I have for the engineering recommendations, going forward with spreading work around, making sure that we're getting all of our bases covered. And again, no slight to United by any means. They've done great work for us. They have 2 other bridges with us already. They're getting a bridge here. They're going to do some work on Teeters Road. It's really about
Other questions or comments?
I would make a motion that we give the Teeters Road project to United and also Bridge 29 to United and all the rest of them as the engineer has recommended.
So
So really, I guess there'd just be one change from the engineer's recommendation would be United for Teeters Road instead of DLZ.
Yeah, thank you. So the motion would be to accept the engineer recommendations with the change of Teeters Road going to United instead of DLZ. Is that correct, Commissioner Boyles?
Right.
Okay. So that motion is on the floor. Does it receive a second? There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, the next item is the capital improvement plan. There is a 2-year plan that needs to get updated. What I have provided to you is not the actual verbiage for the overall lit plan that needs to be signed, but that is the basis for what the highway department's lit plan will be going forward. That includes vehicles, it includes bridges, it does include structure replacements. And again, this is a rough draft, and we can massage this for the next 2 years, or to get approved for our next 2 years. But this is the first look. I believe there's other departments that need to submit as well. This is just my piece. And then I think later on in this year, there'll be more that comes up with the capital improvement plan. This is yours to look at. We can discuss now. You can take back, and we can discuss at a future time, too.
Any questions of Tony on capital plan for the highway department? As he said, this will be an ongoing issue that we'll discuss, but probably should try to wrap up sooner rather than later.
Which is why I wanted to get this in front of you guys this time.
Not hearing anything, I'll assume that we'll continue to take a look at this and consult with Tony so that we can take some type of action, perhaps by the end of the month, certainly prior to the adoption of the budget. Okay, we'll move on to the next thing.
My last item in new business, when we did our last commissioners meeting, we had 3 roads go out to bid that we opened. I had 2 of those roads going to Wallace, Titcher Road and Wilbur. I reviewed those packets while we were here for completeness and to make sure that the low bid numbers were actually matching in the contract and what was said. That all checked out, and Wallace should have been awarded. However, after getting back to the office and doing the bid tabs, taking some time and formulating all of the pricing, comparing the pricing. Wallace did not have a price in for striping. So they had taken that out of the contract. I contacted Wallace. I asked them if they wanted to do it with the contract amount that they provided without any additional funds, but they needed to include contract striping. They said they would not. So at this time, that would go to the second bidder. They are qualified. It was the low bid. They did include striping, and that's the Harding Group. So I would like to re-award and give a notice to proceed to Harding Group for Wilbur Road. Wallace will still do Tincture, and Midwest is still doing Smoky Row.
Who's the new one on Wilbur?
Harding Group.
They would be the next lowest and most responsive bidder.
Hardy?
Harding Group, Harding.
Okay.
Any questions of Tony on the change on Wilbur Road due to the discrepancy in the specifications of the job?
My only thing, I did talk to Dick about it and stuff, and I talked to Tony, and it sounds like there was a miscommunication talking to both of you there.
Yeah, so there were a few people that asked questions about striping. The issue with striping is people who do striping have stopped giving quotes. And I got that from several of the bidders. And I told them the striping, and I was very clear, I thought, the striping can be done next year, but included in this contract. Dick took that to be, we're gonna do the striping next year, so that'll be paid for, bid out next year doing something else. So he did not include that in his striping. The striping was typically, with one outlier, between $9,500 and $11,000. If you add the $9,500 to what Wallace's bid was, they would not have been the low bidder. I asked them, and again, in the bidding process and being open and transparent, I asked them if they would do it for their bidding quote, and at that point, they could have still done it. They said no, that they would not do it. They would need to include more money for striping. At that point, I told them then that we would re-award this to the next lowest bidder.
But they were, if I understand correctly, they were given, Wallace was given the opportunity to do the work at the
Absolutely.
bid price.
At the quoted price, yes.
And they declined.
They
to do
declined that work, yes.
Which is not without understanding.
Absolutely.
I mean, that makes sense. But,
Absolutely. But they had to be given the chance. They said,
but they were given that opportunity.
yes, they were given the opportunity, and they said no.
Any other questions or discussion? We have a proposal to adjust the award for Wilbur Road to Harding Group based on the discussion that we've had here today. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the re-award to Harding Group for Wilbur Road. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0.
We're back in old business.
Next item on the agenda, we have Old Town Waverly Park on the restroom. I'll turn that over to Commissioner Hale for an update.
Yeah, I was just needing to get a couple vendors taken care of. I reached out for heating and air conditioning to Barb Yarnell from up in the Mooresville area, and also Doug Weddle. Weddle was the only one that got it back to us of $5,500. And I'm asking for that to be approved for the heating and air conditioning in the restroom maintenance barn. As far as the electrical, I reached out to John Elliott, reached out to Livewire, Tom Walls. The only one that responded back was Tom Walls at Livewire at a cost of $13,033.84. I am sorry I didn't get that to you in writing. I've got it here on my phone where they text it because they just finished it up a little bit ago. And did get it to us right after the start of the meeting, so I can save this and send this over and print it off as soon as the meeting's over, so. But I would ask that we approve live wire to do the wiring in there, and that would be for that as well as the log cabin. And then Weddle Heating and Air Conditioning out of Mooresville to do the heating and air conditioning in the maintenance restroom building.
And all this would come out of the park budget, is that correct?
Redevelopment Commission.
Development Commission, okay. Any questions on the process on Livewire and the resulting quote, or HVAC, which resulted in a low quote from Weddle? Any questions or discussion on that? Not hearing any, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion that we approve Weddle for heating and air conditioning in Old Town Waverly Park restroom, as well as live wire to do the electric in the restroom, as well as the log cabin.
We have a motion on the floor to approve Livewire for the electrical work and Weddle Heating and Cooling for the HVAC work. That motion is made. I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next item on the agenda, we have a proposed ordinance creating a fee schedule for the Old Town Waverly Park. I believe Mr. Hale and Mr. Wisco will discuss that.
Refer to you. Basically, what we're trying to do, we're trying to go ahead and help generate some more fees. We already charge for rentals on the shelter houses. We also, for Town Square, and the shelter houses of Brookrock Creek. And what we're trying to do is, we've done it in the past, and we've done it for free, but provide hay rides for haunting of Waverly in the amount of $10 for the adults, $5 for kids. Also, for the golf cart tours that we did last year at Waverly, we're going to ask that the council and the commissioners approve that at $2 per person on the golf cart rides for the tours.
I wouldn't have anything to add in particular.
Can somebody refresh my memory on when we charge for rental of the facility for events such as weddings and so forth, do we not have that spelled out in an ordinance?
I would have swore we did somewhere, because we've been doing it for quite some time, but I could not find it. I know the park board passed it, and I just assumed that the commissioner and the council did as well, but that's all I can say, Ryan. And I've not went back and looked in the parks file cabinet and all the different boxes that's there.
Yeah.
I know it's all been done.
Certainly either, I thought perhaps maybe the park board or something in that way, that's why I wasn't able to find it in the ordinance codes, but I looked, wasn't able to find it either. I ran out of time to ask Deb to help potentially track it down. That's in part why I think somewhere in here, well, item 2, just indicating that the ordinance will have the effect of replacing any previously adopted that contradicts, because I wasn't entirely sure.
Yeah. Well, I certainly support the effort to get some additional revenue into the Parks Department fund, and, certainly don't think we should or could charge fees without it being backed up in an ordinance somewhere. So I'll certainly lend a vote to this, and we might need to, at some point in the not-too-distant future, look at incorporating that rental of the facilities into this ordinance by an amendment, and possibly adding some language to the ordinance that would make this applicable across our whole park system and not just specific to Waverly. But I definitely think this is a solution that needs to be pursued, and we can make those amendments at a later time.
I know the original ordinance that was done, Ryan, because it was done back when Brenda Adams was in there. it was addressed in the rental of the two shutter houses in Burkhardt Creek as well. We have never done an ordinance that I know of on Wilbur School.
Okay.
We definitely need to incorporate that, but I know the park board had passed it and everything, and I know the auditors always collected the funds. I give them a check again this morning, so.
Right.
So usually Dan and Brenda was pretty particular, if there wasn't an ordinance, they
Yes.
wouldn't accept them. So.
Right.
But I was not able to find it, and I know Jim couldn't.
Okay, fair enough. Any other discussion or questions on the ordinance as it relates to the fees at Old Town Waverly Park? Not hearing any, I would entertain a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion, we approve the ordinance creating certain fees for Old Town Waverly Park as such as hayride and golf cart tours.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the ordinance as presented, establishing certain fees for Old Town Waverly Park. That motion is made. I will second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And if I'm not mistaken, due to the unanimous vote, a second reading will not be necessary. All right, that brings us to our old business. First up on that is our I-69 Section 6 road transfer agreement.
Okay, so in the meantime, since the last commissioners meeting, we did receive all of the specific data, the exhibits, all the verbiage, and I did provide that to the commissioners for review and comment if they had any. Recently, myself, the county administrator, and the county attorney sat down and we reviewed the Section 5 and the Section 6 transfer agreements side by side. We're all in agreement that the Section 6 transfer agreement is in much more detail in the upfront verbiage and the way they spelled some things out. We had some minor changes that is attached, I think, to this packet on, I think, little things that we would like to see change, but we're not far from having a final product, we believe. This is the issues that we had up front with the way they spell out the detail. Basically, what we really tried to cover ourselves for was we're trying to sign a transfer agreement prior to the roads being completed. In fact, there's a couple structures, Teeters Road and Myra, that aren't even, they haven't even been advertised for letting yet. And we're looking forward signing this prior to that even being advertised out. So we did have concerns about should the county have some type of right of refusal or some type of recourse. However, in reviewing what was spelled out, the county attorney, myself, and the county administrator feel that we are covered due to changes that could come up with what happens in future design. I had a very good conversation with NDOT last night. We will get them our corrections for the verbiage by Tuesday. And I do have some technical corrections that I want to make as far as who maintains control on some structures. There's a few items that I had with the overall exhibits that I want to get clarified and changed. I don't think anything's a showstopper. I think that if you have more comments now, please provide. This will be back up again at the next commissioner meeting for another discussion. Hopefully then with the commissioner meeting after that in October, the first one in October, we can look towards signing the agreement. Again, we felt that this was a very, very good step in the last 2 weeks that we've taken to getting this Section 6 completed. It ends up being about 11 miles of road that'll be transferred to us and 11 bridges. So it is a substantial amount of monies in future that we will have to incorporate into our program. However, we do have a robust program that we will be able to partner welling with NDOT on future projects and main that we have to address. I have also worked a lot with Gary Oakes at the City of Martinsville, and we have coordinated some of the verbiage as well and some of the road transfer agreements, and I think that we've hashed out as much of that as possible as well. So with that said, I'd open the floor up to the commissioners for any type of questions or concerns that they have.
I'd just, I guess, follow that up by indicating that, correct, I think that we all agreed that the proposed agreement, of course, the Section 5 portion, I think, started well before I was
Sure.
here and went on for quite some time. I think this one substantially incorporates the changes that we worked for in Section 5. Looking at these bullet points, you know, one's just a typo. One is something they included in the last one regarding record plans that I, you know, wouldn't imagine is an issue. I think there's a couple substantive things that we'd want to talk to them about, but both substantive and just for clarity's sake. But I substantially agree with what Tony said. Hopefully we can get it done relatively soon.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is adding one line and then defining what required work actually is. The way they spell that out, there's a little bit of ambiguity that we wanted to clean up.
Right, which I think is more addressing the ambiguity than,
Yeah.
than likely, you know, having a significant difference of opinion.
But a big point would be the indemnification that we wanted, I think is identical to what we got from.
It's identical to last time, which
Yes.
we, you know, spent a fair amount of time.
Yes.
Back and forth with.
Other questions or comments on the agreement as it stands right now?
My only comment is, I just think it's really kind of strange that they're asking us to do this without even the roads being done. That's my biggest issue there. I totally concur with NDOT. I think Section 5 carried out way too long, and it needs to be done a lot sooner than later, but it just seems to me, since they are breaking Section 6 down in sections, and you stated earlier, Tony, I mean, Teeters and Myra's not even started. Why are we asking to do all of it in Section 6 as a whole?
Well, I think a big part of it was because of the way Section 5 was handled. And
And I
again,
understand that.
I would not place any of that on necessarily the commissioners, but on my predecessor. Again, they are very appreciative of the conversations that we're having now and how quickly this is happening. And to your point, realistically, we just got all the final products and exhibits 2 weeks ago. And within being 6 to 8 weeks, they would like to have a signed agreement.
And I want to partner with NDOT. They've been great partners to work with, and I commend them on what they're doing in Section 6. I mean, there's no doubt, but it feels like there's a lot of pressure to get this done. That's when we've not even just started laying asphalt even.
Absolutely, and that was to my point. That's something that we talked about yesterday. Was you know, we need to make sure that we're covering ourselves in the sense that you know, putting the cart before the horse.
And I want to make sure, no disrespect to Andy and Tony, or Andy and NDOT. I appreciate what you guys are doing for us, but that just kind of caught me off guard, the urgency.
And again, I think that to NDOT's point, that it was a lot to do with Section 5 and how it ended up being so delayed, because they thought they had agreements earlier on, and then there were a lot of changes that were done.
Yep, yeah, it
So-
carried out way too long.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we should show some courtesy
Absolutely.
in dealing with this one significantly more swiftly.
And we are light years ahead of where we were previously.
My comment is, I think that the upcoming new Board of Commissioners ought to be the one that signs this instead of this board. Because the road still won't be done by then.
Well, according to NDOT and their schedule, the majority of these roads will be done this year. Now, Myra and Teeters will not be, and I think there's a couple cul-de-sacs, so there will be a small percentage of this overall. But to your point, the roads that we are taking in, no, not all of them will be done, but they do claim that, and I will bow to their optimism on that. I see a lot of paving that needs to get done in a very short time. I think that they've got an extended schedule for asphalt, and they're gonna be aggressive, and that's good. But understood that it's their schedule, they're getting it, they've done a lot of work in a very short period of time, so.
Yeah, and I commend them on that. They
Sure.
have, and I feel confident that they will. I know me and you talked about it, you don't think they'll get it all paid, but I feel confident they will get her done this year.
And I do look forward to seeing that, well, hearing
Lord-
about it.
Lord willing, anyway.
Exactly, exactly, weather pertaining. But I will say that they have been extremely responsive in some of the constituents that have voiced some concerns and some minor changes that they've wanted as far as entrances and driveways go. They have really done a good job, this design firm and NDOT, in accommodating the county's requests in a lot of ways. So I would like to commend on that, so.
Thank you and Jim and Josh for going over this, so I greatly appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments for me? No motions required, just wanted to give this as an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Continuing with old business. Oh, I lost my spot. We are on page 98 now of the meeting agenda. This brings us to our mass gathering ordinance discussion, which we've been kind of bantering back and forth over the last couple of meetings, and I think Josh and Jim have an update for us, and we might be in a position to take action today.
Thank you. And I didn't want to interrupt Tony, but I did want to say you guys are fortunate to have him working on this. He's been a great asset to you all. Kenny, we shared your heartburn at the start of the process with the fact that some roads hadn't been accepted yet. There's the adage, good fences make good neighbors. Bullet point 3 on that summary Jim gave you, we think is probably the last fence post we need to be fully confident that if something happens that we don't like, it could be rejected. So there was some pretty robust language that allows us to reject things that are up to snuff and to be able to inspect the roads in advance. So I just will add that one caveat. In terms of the mass gathering ordinance, you have seen a pretty good revision the first time around. Jim has made some changes and tweaks to that. There's a couple things in here. I believe you all got my markup set. Some are policy questions that you all, we would like your opinion on, and that can be today or it can be later. And I'll draw your attention to just a couple of those items. One of them is on the 3rd page of the draft, and it talks about prior to the enactment of this chapter. We had a Chapter 93 that was adopted many years ago. The question is, some of the same carve-outs that were grandfathered in the first time, do they reset now? Do we just completely do away with things that have been acted prior and treat this as a new item altogether? That's, in Jim and I's opinion, a policy issue, not a ordinance issue. And so there are a couple places where you see that question written, and that's one things I would like you guys to think about. Another question Jim's waiting for direction from the state. We talk about a license, and that's directly from state code. We're trying to find out if we need to actually create a license to hand out to somebody, so that's something we're still waiting on. There's one section on telephones that is fairly antiquated, but it's still in state code, and so we need to insert that language. And then the rest of the ordinance itself, I think Jim and I are comfortable with, and simply want you all to review it, make sure you're comfortable with it. And then there's an application that accompanies what would be this resolution. And there's only 2 changes I see so far one that needs to be made. We need to insert a section to the application where people can give their plan to limit the number of people required. And then there's another policy question. We put an electrical access section so that any work done would be done by a licensed electrician. We're talking 5,000 people, so there could be some pretty big power needs. I think that's a reasonable requirement from you all's point, but I do think that's policy. I don't know that that would necessarily be required, so we wanted to draw your attention to that. Those are the things that we feel are still kind of up in the air. The rest of it is completely up to your guys' discretion how you would like to handle this ordinance. And then we do have, I guess, one other section I forgot to mention, that we would want to include a fee schedule amendment, so to the rest of our fee schedules.
Only thing I'd add on to that would be that first, I have an updated ordinance adopting it that includes the fee addition to chapter 35. If we're so inclined to take action, I'm adding in the omitted section L regarding telephones. And I've been in kind of a back and forth phone tag communication with somebody at the Department of Health as far as the statute requires a portion of that fee goes to the state, trying to find out where we send it, as well as do we need to create our own license, or do they have one they can share with us? Try to answer any questions beyond that.
So Jim, does that address then most or all of the outstanding issues? Or are we at a place where there's still facts that need to be ascertained before we would have a vote?
I think that probably addresses everything. The one thing that Josh mentioned first, which, I think would be up to at the discretion of the commissioners, with regard to, there's a couple references that are under exceptions, as in people or entities that don't have to apply for this license. There's a reference to enactment of this chapter. Do we want to just remove that caveat or that reference altogether? Do we want to say enactment of the long ago past ordinance, enactment of this? I think that's probably for you all to decide. I'd probably suggest just striking that caveat altogether if we're talking about the difference of what, 3 times prior or 2 years prior to now, or 1980. Right. Same point. So, if that was how you guys wanted to proceed, I think we delete that. The language I'm adding in that somehow was omitted from the lengthy list of requirements simply is another requirement to provide telephones connected to outside lines sufficient to provide for the maximum number of people to be assembled at the rate of at least one separate line and receiver for each 1,000 people. Certainly discussed at points that probably that, among other items, might be antiquated, but they're still included in the code. So they're still required. I think then my thought would be, if we're comfortable with those things, that we could proceed today, and then some of the details with the, where do we send the fee to the state, and maybe fine-tuning the application we could handle going forward. We certainly could make those changes and bring it back next time too, whatever you guys are most comfortable with.
We'll hear from the sheriff here for a second. Make sure
Thank you.
he's comfortable where we are, because this affects you more than it affects us, frankly.
A little bit, yeah. And when I was reading through this, one thing that I saw maybe we might want to look at on licensing requirements, bulletproof number 9. It says fire protection, including alarms, extinguishers, devices, and fire lanes, and escape sufficient to meet all state and local standards for the location of the assembly, and sufficient emergency personnel to operate efficiently the required equipment. So, and then you go back and who checks all this stuff and where it goes to. It goes to me, it goes to Department of Health, I know Planning and Zoning, but I don't believe it goes to any fire personnel for them to check any of this.
Where were you reading from? I'm sorry.
I read, it was titled Licensing Requirements.
It's about page 4.
And then bulletproof number 9.
The statute dictates that the license will be issued by the sheriff, and that the Department of Health shall review the application and take whatever steps necessary. We included reference to, and we could certainly include reference to fire personnel or whatever that would make sense. I think that part of the required entities, Department of Health and the sheriff, and then I think that there's some basically discretion as far as who else needs to participate. And that's kind of what the application reflects, as well as we inserted sharing the application with, in addition to the County Board of Health, sharing the application with the Plan Commission, Highway Superintendent, who really aren't specifically named, but just that it may
Right.
make sense that they have an
Right.
interest. We certainly could name similar entity to address that concern.
Yeah, I think that ought to be, if they're gonna be checking the fire portion of that, they probably should be included in whatever fire district that's gonna fall under, wherever their event's gonna be, to look at, or either for their reviews. I guess that would be like Charlie Fraker's job here within the town. And then, I'm sure Mooresville has their own fire department that's gonna check that stuff and make sure that that falls under also, so. And then my second part of that, would it behoove us to, once we get this up to where we think maybe it should be, to send it out to Department of Health, to the chief fire people, to have them look at it and see if it's something that they see anything further that they think ought to be included or not included in that?
I mean, I think that's up to,
I don't know. I'm just something to throw out there to, you know, if they've not been involved before and what they have to do and
Yeah, no, you raised a very good point. I mean, that's obviously a requirement of the ordinance, and so who in the world is going to look at that? And I would venture to say that most of the applicants under this permit are probably operating in an unincorporated area.
correct.
Because of the large scale, and would be under the fire jurisdiction of a trustee. And, you know, either through a township fire department or through their contracted nonprofit fire corporation.
And it may not be. The next one that came to mind that I would think of, and probably the only one that would be like what Mr. Helms has every year, which might reach that number if we go back to, you know, what he can do without COVID-19 coming in and doing that. And that would fall under the incorporated, but it's on county grounds too, so.
Right.
Where that would fall under and how that would work also, so. Just thought maybe eyes on this to see some things that maybe we're missing and what they think, but I don't know, whatever the commissioners board thinks they ought to do. And Jim.
I mean, I think that's a totally valid point that probably doesn't have an entirely clear answer, at least from existing statute and where we're at. I certainly think them laying eyes on it wouldn't be a bad thing at all. I think that whether that were to occur or not, we could consider, you know, changing who gets a copy of this application to also then include some discretionary on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, since it's submitted to their office, or the
Right,
sheriff, as
yeah.
far as who it makes sense to be involved. I mean, part of this is the County Board of Health shall participate, and the sheriff shall issue license, but, you know, there may be some events in which the highway superintendent has big concerns and feels it necessary to take certain actions, and there may be other events where it's nothing at all, and I suspect that, you know, those considerations will vary from event to event, and then, of course, you know, the additional point that doesn't alleviate those things, but nonetheless this is, you know, presumably going to be a pretty rare
Yes.
occasion, but nonetheless, still needs to be addressed.
Right.
That's all the comments I had, thank you.
Thank
Unless
you,
you have
Jim.
any questions of me.
I don't think so. I don't know if it would be appropriate, because most, if not all of this particular section is coming straight in an attempt to mirror the state law.
Almost entirely.
The sheriff raises a good point that we're not qualified, and his office is not necessarily qualified either to make judgment on this, fire standards, because it's not your business. But we don't have any county official in our employment that would be able to make that call, so it'd be up to whatever jurisdiction was involved. And then, so the question I would have is if we take the point the sheriff's raised and get them involved in reviewing it, do they have, would that entity have the ability to stand in the way of otherwise getting it approved? And that might be in conflict to the law.
Can I add one quick point? Jim and I talked about this a lot. So the only agency that gives an affirmative recommendation or not is the Board of Health. All other agencies, it's essentially a non-binding resolution.
An advisory
that we've,
rubber stamp.
solicited. And so I do think it could make sense to add into the distribution list the relevant fire agency, and that they could give a non-binding recommendation that would then come back to our county, and the Board of Health can consider that at the time.
I like that approach. I mean, because I'd like to alleviate your office from trying to make that determination when it's not the business that you're in, but it's clearly part of the process.
We'll give you a fire hat. You might be able to do it.
Yeah, we get, which hat you get on that day? That would be appreciative. Eyes on whoever does that and just gives a recommendation. Thank you, Josh.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Josh? Well, as much as I hate to say this, because we have made a full-time effort out of discussing this mass gathering ordinance throughout the whole summer and now into the fall. But there are probably a handful of changes that ought to just be cleaned up, particularly adding in this language. I'd err on the side of just doing a full vote on a clean copy on the 21st, but that's just one person's opinion, so I would defer to the interests of the board. So we squared away on addressing this issue with the fire department, also addressing the issue with the exceptions on who has to apply or who doesn't have to apply based on previous issues, and then the other questions that paragraph that Jim is adding. I think if I'm keeping track right, that those were our major changes.
Address eliminating or not the exceptions that reference prior to enactment of this chapter?
I would personally be comfortable with eliminating it. Are you, the other two commissioners, okay with that?
Talking about 93.02 license necessity.
Yes, it would, like the top of page 3.
Eliminating all these?
No. If you look at like C3 and C6, there may be another, that, like, for instance, C6 says, provisions of this chapter shall not apply to any school or educational organization which has existed for more than 2 years prior to the passage of this chapter. Okay.
Not all of them.
Right.
So we'll have a final clean copy for consideration on the 21st. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Thank you, Jim and Josh.
Moving on to other business, we have minutes from July 20 as well as August 3rd. Those are before you for consideration.
Motion to approve the minutes of July 20 and August 3rd.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of July 20 and August 3 as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Our claims. We have payroll on August 7 and the 21st, as well as the PERF portion that the county pays of those 2 dates, as well as FICA for August 7 and August 21, as well as accounts payable in the amount of $1,180,827.96. I stole yours. There are no holds on the accounts payable. Do we have a motion on the claim?
Motion on the claims.
Motion to approve has been made. Is there a second? Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Holiday schedule for 2021 had been distributed earlier. There was a minor correction. Deb has passed out the updated version. It primarily deals with the days of the week pertaining Christmas and around that time schedule. So she has that 2021 revised holiday schedule before you if the board wishes to take action.
Motion on the holiday schedule.
Motion to approve the holiday schedule as presented has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. Although any other discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. We also have the 2021 meeting schedule that's been proposed. Any discussion on that? Not here.
Motion to approve it temporarily.
Always subject to change by the new administration. We have a motion to approve the 2021 meeting schedule. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. I believe we're down to our last item, and that is our Justice Center update on our expenses there.
No new updates since our last meeting 2 weeks ago.
Well, Josh, that was all righty. Thank you for that valuable contribution. Good. That's a good news, though, because we're not spending any more money on the building, it sounds like, or at least very close. Anything else that needs to come before the Board of Commissioners?
Motion to adjourn.
To adjourn has been made. I'll gladly second that. All those in favor of adjourning until the 21st signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll see you then.